Spencer Wells is one of those important people who did the early genetic tests for people. He connected a couple traits. So, looking at people like the Khoisan, who was known at the time to be the earliest people. In India, they found Black African DNA that ties these people to the movement of out of Africa. And then, of course, there were some other information. The only problem is things like 23andMe and stuff like that started to crop up. Spencer Wells, as much as he did an honest job, also they played with narratives. And this is what we're going to look at.
I grew up in Ulan-Ude, Buryatia. It's a republic inside Russia, right on the border with Mongolia. So I'm Buryat or Buryat Mongolian, 3/4 of me anyway. And I've known that my whole life and it was never a question. But last year I met someone in person for the first time and we'd only ever spoken online. And the first thing, genuinely, for the first thing, this person said to me when we were face to face was, "Oh, so you are the granddaughter of a mass rapist? Hello." Bro, like it was a fun fact. Like it was a joke that we were both on it. And the
So I've heard this narrative as well about Asians, especially those from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, part of Asia in general, so China and those places, that basically the people who have some Mongol DNA are all related to Genghis Khan. This, of course, is where the narrative comes in, played into by people like Spencer Wells, played into by other geneticists who know that people want to be connected to an important person. They don't want to know that they're connected to some random Mongol who probably spread their DNA before any of the Mongol raids, and then it became even more widespread because of the Mongols.
thing is, like, I didn't even get angry. It just kind of flew next to my ears, but it hurt something inside me because hearing someone calling your descendant ancestry a mass rapist, I just kind of laughed it off. Well, that's what bothers me the most. Because I'd heard versions of this so many times online that I already built this little wall around it. And I kind of didn't care about that. Look at this Chinggis Khan comments mass rapist. You can look at every of my videos. This is like one of the most popular comment. The 1 in 200, 16 million. The rape statistics people drop like they're being interesting. Like
The fascinating part, of course, why they're dropping this is because it adds a narrative to an already famous person, Genghis Khan, that outside of everything he did, he had time to father this many children. Now, we have to be honest about the truth, which it's in written sources. It is written that the Mongols did take a lot of wives from, not wives, but a lot of concubines from several tens of different civilizations, which is one of the reasons why this narrative is not debunked by geneticists themselves. It has enough weight behind it that they could play with it, even though they know that it's probably not the full truth.
they're being saying a fucking historical fact. And I was used to it because I just, when you have so many comments, you just get used to it. But something was very different about hearing it in person. From someone who was smiling and who genuinely believed they were sharing a fact and they didn't try to insult me. It's my friend, he didn't mean anything bad. It's just, that's what bothers me the most. And I went home and I did what I probably should have done years earlier. I read the actual study. Part 1, the lie.
So this part is important because, again, when you go and look at the studies again, I'll actually give a few examples. So if you look at Egypt, a lot of people will like to take the Ramses III DNA and mean that and try to say that black people who have that DNA are the direct descendants of Ramses III. That's not true. A lot of the Jewish DNA that has been found, it's placed in the Middle East, but it's actually corresponds more with Europe. But because narratives, right? They're like, okay, well, Jewish people kind of come from Israel. That's what they think, but it's actually a European DNA. There's way more. I remember they were actually doing free DNA tests at one point for East Africans of all kinds because, firstly, they couldn't. A lot of them couldn't afford the DNA test because it's like $100, I think, something like that. And so a lot of East Africans didn't, they didn't have to pay. They were doing them for free, which is one of the things about the 23andMe and all of these things that are genius, is that they made the world pay for a study. That's crazy. They made the world. This is like saying, hey, we need to know the blood type of the people around the world. Pay us to get your blood type so that we could have your blood type. It was a genius move on their part. Now, obviously, they were interested in East Africans for a couple of reasons. One, because East Africa, it's known to have a mixed population, but they don't know how far it is. And, East Africans are not South Africans. Like, South Africans barely have any mixed stuff in them. But then when they started testing East Africans, they started with Ethiopians because those seem like the most mixed. Then they went with Somalians. And then they went with people like Kenyans and Tanzanians. And surprisingly, even though some looked completely blacker than any other people in the world, some of them came back with 5% Middle Eastern, and some of them even came back with Madagascan DNA.
So everyone believes this. And I want you to stay with me here, because I know some of you have already seen takes on this. But what the researchers actually wrote and what they said on tape is not what any of those takes showed you. I think I'm the only one who cares about the topic so fucking deeply. So here's the thing about the Chinggis Khan mass rapist story. Nobody questions it. It just exists as a cultural, historical fact. Like gravity. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. It's like the earth being round, and then even that has been more debated than Chinggis Khan as a mass rapist. So everyone just believes it as a fact.
The part that the Mongols were, forcing women to, be in their arms is that's not a myth. That is written down facts. But the idea that everybody descends from Genghis Khan or any of one individual that part is the part that's more of a lie. One individual, yes, but not necessarily one individual during the Mongol time. That would have been when it expanded, but that wouldn't be necessarily that person's DNA.
Because Chinggis Khan, Mongol Empire is demonized so heavily that it's hard not to believe he raped millions of women. But let's look at the sources.
Millions is crazy. There's no way it can be millions. It's probably around, because he was a very busy person, it's probably around 200-300 people.
This is not just some random internet rumor. National Geographic covered it, BBC covered it, Time Magazine covered it, the New York Times, every major DNA testing company, 23andMe, Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, they all reference it. The comment sections under every video about Mongolian Empire or Chinggis Khan are full of it. And they all trace back to one source, one study, published in 2003 in the American Journal of Human Genetics. The genetic legacy of the Mongols. Wow! Now here's what I want you to do. Hold the title in your head for a second, because notice what it says. Mongols. Not Genghis Khan specifically, the Mongols.
That's the important part here, because again, it has to do with a Mongolian DNA, piece of DNA that spread throughout. And again, we've seen other DNA move throughout. Of course, this one is one of the most spread out because, of course, the Chinese are one of the most numerous people in the world. And then add to that we've got places like, I actually forgot about Russia as well, but Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iraq. Is it Iraq? Whatever the one is right next to Pakistan. I forgot what that is.
That's the first thing I noticed when I actually opened the paper. The marketing beautiful name. And second, wow. The Mongols. Okay, so let's read it together. So I'm going to read you lines directly from this paper with exact quotes on screen. Because what the researchers actually wrote is not what anyone is repeating, though this is exactly what they wanted. So the gap between those two things is the entire story. The study is 2 pages long and that's it. 2 pages that were published in a genetic journal in March 2003. 23 authors, mostly from Oxford University. Here's what they actually found. So in 1998, a group of researchers traveled across Central Asia collecting blood samples from men. 2,123 men total, exactly, from 16 different populations. Mongolians, Kazakhs, Uzbeks, Kyrgyz, Hazaras from Pakistan, Uyghurs from China. A wide geographic spread. But
This, of course, is a good idea because, as you can see, this is where the Mongols went. I think the Khazars on the other side of Russia. Then you have Pakistan, Uzbekistan, all of those areas, the Central Asian areas. And then, of course, you have the other side of Russia and China. And they almost took over Japan, but they lost because the naval parts of Japan were just too strong. And they nearly went down to Indonesia. But again, they lost.
they analyzed the Y chromosomes, the chromosomes that pass directly from father to son. They found something unusual, a cluster of very similar Y chromosomes appearing across multiple different populations, and they called it the star cluster. It showed up in about 8% of men across the entire region, and that's genuinely interesting science. A single male lineage spreading that fast, that wide in roughly 1,000 years. That's statistically extraordinary. The math checks out. Something unusual happened. But then, and this is where it gets important, they had to explain what that unusual thing was, and this is the line. This is the line that launched 24 years of mass rapist comments. The lineage is carried by likely male descendants of Genghis Khan. Likely.
So this is her first example that she uses as evidence that this myth is a myth, which is the word likely. Now, of course, we have to be very careful. When people say likely, it doesn't mean they don't believe that it was Genghis Khan. In fact, they're probably saying likely because they do believe that it was Genghis Khan. The reason behind it is because they know that the Mongols were good spreaders of DNA, and to the victor goes the spoils. Who's going to get the most spoils? Genghis Khan is what they're thinking. The only problem is, and this is where I think she's not going to mention this a lot, is this DNA that Genghis Khan has probably exists within all the Mongols before they spread. So it probably existed within most the males and the females of the let's say the males of the Mongols, because they were such a small-ish community, and then it spread via multiple men who are Mongol, and then these guys just trace it and go, oh, it's Genghis Khan. But it's in that period of Genghis Khan. So it could be 300 years before Genghis Khan. It could be 400, 500 years before Genghis Khan.
Did you hear that? Did you read that? Likely. Yeah, you missed that, like everyone else. So it's not confirmed, it's not proven, and not established. Likely.
To go even further, I think Genghis Khan's body was like trampled on and whatever in order to avoid something. I forgot what it was. I don't remember my Genghis Khan history that much, but I don't think they actually have tested his DNA, and I don't think they ever will be able to, except through his relatives.
Likely, bro. Do you understand? 23 years of mass rapist allegation because of likely. So let's talk next. And then we therefore propose that it has spread by a novel form of social selection. Propose, and then alternative explanations cannot be excluded. Cannot be excluded. In science, these words have specific meaning. Likely and propose. Likely and propose cannot be excluded. These are the words researchers use when they are speculating, when they don't have proof. It's when.
So the only thing I can say is, even though they don't have proof, it's quite clear that they at least to some degree believe it. And like I said, I think it's possible that this just happens to be that somebody who was Mongol had this DNA inside them, and then they had had this DNA, and then it spread within the Mongols, and then from the Mongols it spread throughout the entire world because the Mongols were getting people all around. And of course, we can't rule out the fact that people back then used to have polygamy and all kinds of stuff.
They're offering a hypothesis. It's when they're offering hypothesis and not a conclusion. Sorry, I don't know how to say it. But there's one more thing that study admits that almost nobody talks about. They never tested Genghis Khan's DNA because they couldn't. His body was never been found, according to the secret history of the Mongols, and that's the only one reliable source. That's the oldest primary source on his life written in 1200s. The location of his burial was kept secret, so no tomb or no remains, we don't have reference of his DNA. And there is
So as I mentioned, we don't need to have his body specifically to be able to trace his DNA. We just need to find people who are related to him. So for example, Kublai Khan, Mongol Khan, is it Mongai? I forgot how you say his name. But all the Khans, if you can pretty much figure their DNA out, then you're going to figure out what Genghis Khan's DNA is, and you'll be done. But it is true that I think maybe he's the one where they killed a bunch of people in order to keep his burial secret. I think also he was like a superstitious person. He believed that there was a way of living forever. One of those guys. I think Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z is kind of based around him, or is it Frieza? One of those two.
Researchers knew this. And in 2010, 7 years after the study published, they sat down for an interview with Radiolab, and they said out loud on tape exactly what they actually think, but they couldn't write it down on paper because they would get shit on. Said exactly how the Genghis Khan connection was actually born. This is the part nobody has played for you ever.
DNA is used to track crimes. This we know from police dramas like CSI.
A group of scientists led by this guy.
Yeah, I am Spencer Wells.
So my name is Tatiana Zeria. I'm an Italian researcher.
Lead researcher Tatiana Zeria. Direct quote from the transcript is, this is what she's saying.
Spread of the Mongol Empire.
As soon as she saw it,
I went to Chris and told him, Chris, I think I found Genghis Khan.
I think I found. That's it. That's the Eureka moment. A visual match between a map of Y chromosome distribution and a map of the Mongol Empire. And someone said, Genghis Khan? First of all, it just all sounds like a beautiful marketing history, right? It's like how our brand was born. Someone came up with this idea and someone said this. Bullshit.
So it's absolutely true, again, that the people, the DNA people, were obsessed at the time with marketing things, and they've got all kinds of things: the Africa Human Genome Project, the This Genome Project. Europe, they had like a ton of their DNA. At one time in Europe, they even had their DNA correspond a lot with Africans. Be like, oh, you got this African DNA, which was overturned because it turned out that it's like historically African DNA. So like stuff that's traceable to real like ancient Africa, like out of Africa theories. But at the time, everybody was like, oh, we're part African. That kind of happened somewhere in Europe. I forgot the documentary. But these are the narratives that they had to like spin in order to make people interested. And boy, did everybody do the DNA. And as I mentioned before, no one who does 23andMe wants to get back, A, you're just a Chinese guy, or A, you're just a Japanese guy, or A, you're just a South African, or A, they're looking for some mixed stuff in there. And if you don't get that, then kind of wasted your money.
Co-author Spencer Wells saying in the same interview,
All the evidence points in the same direction.
That looks like a duck and it walks like a duck. You know, the inference was that it was a duck. This was Genghis Khan's Y chromosome lineage.
Brother, you are Donald Duck. You are Donald Duck. Why? I'm gonna show you why, but it's the Donald Duck who's swimming in the gold. So he said inference. Inference. Not a proof, not evidence. Inference. And then the Radiolab host, not the scientist, the host, shout out to him, said the quiet part out loud.
The only way you ever know for sure that it's anybody's mutation is you gotta go to the body, some DNA from the body, see if it matches the mutation. So you gotta find Genghis Khan's body.
So you gotta find Genghis Khan's body. So the Spencer Wells.
Well, in order to know if the mutation starts with him, you gotta find his body. But again, I think it's very unlikely that it was one man like Genghis Khan, whatever. I think what's more likely is that the Mongols who already carried this, they had a bunch of kids, those kids had a bunch of kids, those kids had a bunch of kids, and it basically spread that way rather than like this giant
Response was on that.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate proof.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate proof. So let me make sure we're all clear on what we just established. The scientists who published this study admitted in their own words that the Genghis Khan connection was an inference, that it's all likely and we just propose. So it's a guess, a visual pattern match, unverifiable without a body that nobody has ever found, and they published it in a major genetic journal anyway. Now, I said I was saving the most embarrassing part of the study.
Of course, this is like throwing meat to dogs when it comes to the media, because of course they're going to eat that up. It's like, oh, wait, the papers are saying they found Genghis Khan. But again, misleading. No one found Genghis Khan. And they never will, to be honest.
I want to show it to you now, because this is way more than just speculation. This is a logic problem so basic it wouldn't pass a first year philosophy class. Ask your brother or sister, they will even tell you that sounds stupid. So the researchers needed something to connect their Y chromosome finding to Genghis Khan specifically. And here's what they used: the Hazara people of Pakistan. So if you don't know that, the Hazaras have oral traditions that pass down for 800 years, that they are descendants of Genghis Khan. And the study says a large proportion of the Hazara profiles do indeed lie in the star cluster, thus supporting their oral tradition and suggesting that Genghis Khan carried the star cluster haplotype. Do you see the logic here? Let me draw it out again. Step 1. Hazaras say they're descendants from Genghis Khan. That's an oral tradition. Step 2. Hazaras have the C3 star marker. That's genetic data. And step 3. Therefore, the C3 star is Genghis Khan's marker. That's the conclusion. I don't think you need to be a scientist or genetic or whatever to understand the whole problem of this logical chain. And step 4, therefore the Hazaras' oral tradition is confirmed. So that's back to step 1, and you're using the oral tradition to prove the genetics. Then using the genetics to prove the oral tradition. That's like circular. In any other context.
So oral tradition is actually very important because it can keep various secrets about a long lost people, like when we found out that East Asians existed in Africa, which I'm very interested if they have the Genghis Khan DNA, quote unquote Genghis Khan DNA as well. But of course, I'm going to tie these together because a lot of people think that that entire East Asian DNA in Africa is tied to Zheng He reaching that area. But that's because a lot of people have not read the study either. We'll get back to that.
It wouldn't survive peer review. But here, where it gets worse. because the primary source, the secret history of the Mongols, most authoritative chronicle of Genghis Khan's life, contains a scene that directly blows this entire argument apart. Genghis Khan's eldest son Jochi was born while his mother Borte was held captive by a rival tribe, the Merkids. She was kidnapped shortly after her marriage, held for months, and when she was rescued she was already pregnant. And Genghis Khan publicly accepted Jochi as his son, and he by the way made a law about you gotta accept any kid that wife has, but you don't know that, of course. So Genghis Khan accepted his son, but his other sons didn't, and they called him a Merkid bastard. The secret history recorded the confrontation. How could we be governed by a bastard of the Merkids? The dispute followed Jochi his entire life. If you ask any Mongol, they will tell you the same story, that this is like disputed thing, but the law is law. Whoever it is, this is your son, right? So the Golden Horde is the Western empire that ruled Central Asia for generations, was founded and ruled by Jochi's descendants. The Hazara people claim descent through that lineage, so even if you accept everything else in the study, even if the C3 star marker is genuinely connected to this ruling dynasty, you still don't know whose DNA you're actually tracking.
This is actually a good response by her, because yes, even if you go by oral tradition, you'd run into the problem that you're looking at someone who probably is not Genghis Khan. But here's the thing, this goes further into the thing that the DNA that they're testing is some paternal person who already had this DNA before Genghis Khan, and then it spread through multiple different people.
Jochi's father might have been the man who kidnapped his mother. The researchers read the secret history, it's a primary source. They had to have known this before selling something. But they didn't mention it a single time. They know it, but they never mentioned that. That just, that just doesn't make sense. The media did work for them. March 2003, the study publishes and the media explodes. And I want to show you exactly what happened, because the speed of this is worth paying attention to. When I was researching all of that, it fucking shocked me. It just, whoa. So basically, the study says likely descendants, but headline immediately said confirmed descendants, evidence. When the study says prolific reproduction, headlines immediately said mass rape.
Like I said, this is like throwing meat to the dogs, obviously, because they love a sensational story, and people love narratives that are connected to giant figures. That's why there's always a story about the finding of Noah's Ark. There's always a story about some samurai, like they have to, or Yasuke or something, like it has to be a narrative, otherwise it can't be, it's not going to be taken serious. It's going to be too boring.
Prophilic lover. Genghis Khan might be the father of millions. So look at what actually got published. New York Times, a prolific Genghis Khan, it seems, helped people to populate the world. National Geographic, Genghis Khan a prolific lover, DNA data implies. DNA data. So far, fine. Those are hits.
She's not even gonna let that one go by. I let that one slip by because I was like, okay, DNA data. Yeah. It's not DNA data in the same way.
It seems, implies, but watch what happens next. Within weeks, how one man's rape spree changed history. The biological legacy of conquest, 16 million descendants of a mass rapist. The rape framing didn't come from a study, even though they imply that. The word rape doesn't appear once in the original paper still, but in their head for sure. Not once. So the researchers actually used the phrase social selection. They talked about conquered populations and reproductive success. The media added rape.
To defend the media a little bit over here, it's because the Mongols did, do that a lot, which, by the way, almost every other group did back then as well. Like large amounts of groups that were expanding the way that the Mongols did, of which there were a lot of groups at that time. well, not exact same time, but you got the Vikings, you've got, you know, I don't want to get too deep into other ones, but you've got the Bangala, you've got all these other groups who they kind of do the exact same thing.
And then the internet made it permanent. And the researchers said nothing, or at least they didn't find anything. They didn't correct the record, they didn't push back on the mass rapist framing, they gave interviews promoting whatever they're selling. They appeared on a podcast, they became the faces of a fascinating historical genetic discovery. But they never said that that word isn't in our paper, and the media misreading a study. That can be incompetence. Clickbait has been doing it for decades. What I'm about to show you is different, because what happened next at the same university from the same labs within a year of a publication, within weeks, that can't be explained by incompetence. So let me show you what I think is the most important piece of evidence in this entire investigation, and almost nobody has connected these dots, or at least I have never seen that. 12 of the 23 authors of the 2003 study listed Oxford University's Department of Biochemistry as their affiliation. Senior author Chris Tyler Smith ran his lab there from 1986 to 2003, and lead author Tatiana Zerzhal worked there. So this was Oxford's study. Now, also at Oxford University, not in a different city or different building or different institution, at Oxford was a professor named Brian Sykes, professor of human genetics. He'd been at Oxford since 1973. He and Tyler Smith had overlapped there for 17 years, both working on Y chromosome population genetics. And in 2000, 3 years before the study published, Sykes founded a company called Oxford Ancestors, a DNA ancestry testing company, operating from within Oxford University's own laboratory facilities, not adjacent to it, not nearby, from inside the university. In 2018, Sykes himself described it: "Our labs at the university were threatened with closure due to redevelopment." So, our labs at the university. Interesting. So now watch the timeline. March 2003, Oxford's biochemistry department publishes Genghis Khan's study.
That's good investigating on her part. I didn't even know this part. I don't really have a comment because there's a lot of accusations being thrown around, but yes, I can see why she would assume that these people were being nefarious with the way that they did this. I will say that, yeah, like a lot of the stuff they were doing back then with DNA and stuff, it was overreach.
But July 2004, Oxford Ancestors launches a Genghis Khan ancestry test from the same university, from labs in the same institution, by a professor who had shared that institution with study's senior author for 17 years. Sykes told the media that we have circumstantial but very good evidence that this is Genghis Khan's chromosomes without having his DNA sample. He admitted it. He admitted it wasn't proven, but he saw the tests anyway. Now here when it crosses from suspicious to proven, because someone actually tested Oxford Ancestors' claim, and what happened when they did is the clearest proof of what this company was actually selling. University of Miami accounting professor named Thomas Robinson paid for Oxford Ancestors' Genghis Khan test, and Oxford Ancestors told him, "You are direct descendant of Genghis Khan." Robinson, being an academic, got a second opinion from a competitor, Family Tree DNA, and their finding is direct line descendant claim didn't hold. He matched some markers, but a confirmed direct line wasn't there.
Again, a typical reality here, because of course, like I mentioned, yes, direct line is different than having some similarities genetically. We know that Genghis Khan would have had the same type of DNA as a lot of the other Mongols. It's not like he would have been this completely unique person, but direct line, all of these people directly come from Genghis Khan, seems very, very unlikely. But it's believed by the entire world. In fact, there are people who don't even care about DNA who know that information.
And Oxford ancestors' response when confronted with this? They stood by their original result. Yeah, you kind of don't want to go back if you're already lying, right? Like, just might as well go to the finish line. A company selling ancestry tests from university laboratories based on a study produced by colleagues in the same institution. Standing by a result that independent lab disputed. That's not science. Feels to me like sales, good sales. Is it like some Wolf of Wall Street kind of thing? Like, and the study authors working in the same building said nothing. Here's the detail that keeps coming back to me when I think about what Oxford Ancestors was actually selling. A 2021 study on DNA ancestry testing found that over 60% of people who ordered a test never even accessed their results. More than half never opened them.
In 2020, why would they even order them if they're not going to open them? What was the point of that? Now the government tells you DNA.
So if the product is ancestry information, that number is a disaster. But if the product is the DNA sample itself, that number completely irrelevant. You already have what you need before they even log in and get the results. Oxford Ancestors ran for 20 years. Brian Sykes died in December 2020. The company closed a few weeks later on December 31st, 2020, after 20 years of Genghis Khan tests. Built on one word, and God knows how much money they made, and God knows how many kids got bullied because of that shit. So, let's go back. Here where we are, a 2-page study built on one word, likely, got stripped of every hedge by media that needed a viral story. And the researchers admitted on tape it was an inference, and like a duck. The circular logic they used to connect it to Genghis Khan wouldn't survive a first-year logic class. And within a year of publication, a company from the same Oxford labs was selling DNA tests based on it. Tests that were independently disputed, that they stood by anyway for 20 years. And that's the myth. That's how it was built.
Now, of course, again, you could go the other way around because the word likely and possible also means it is possible. It also means it is likely.
That's what people are repeating when they use it as a greeting. But here's the question I haven't answered yet. The researchers who collected 2,123 blood samples from Central Asian communities in 1998, who funded that expedition? Who decided they should go specifically to those regions, and where are those blood samples now? Because when I started pulling that thread, the study stopped being the story. And my dear friends, follow my channel, put that notification button because I'm gonna post the second part very soon. I've been holding this information for a very long time. I was crying right here from all this nervous bullshit I was going through from uncovering all of that, but I have more interesting investigative series coming. God give me strength. The Munch Tengri.
If you're interested in that, this is her channel name. And yes, the video only has 18,000 views. So the myth is going to continue.